As you can see, this session is all about being immersive and experiential. So I'm just going to ask the panelists to come up and stop immersing themselves with each other. We had discussed whether we should just sit in the audience and prove how the whole thing works, but I think we're going to go for this option. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The session is called Be a Trendsetter. And what we're looking to do is to understand how to embrace immersive and experiential, what it actually means, some hints and tips. So we've got some broad questions to ask these guys. What I will do towards the end is open up to questions from the floor, because obviously it's important that you are part of this. So this morning, my name is Andrew White. I'm from Triggerfish. I'm moderating this session, or I might actually be stopping a fight. We'll see how it goes. It's been very interesting so far. They've been very candid with each other. In the middle, we have Isabel Soden, who is founder of Reuben Fields. Just to my left is Mike Cunheim, who is UK MD for Jack Morton. And then we have Sam Bompass, who is on the left in these special trousers. And what a shirt. Do ask him about that later on. If I could just get, or if you guys could just go through some of the brands that you're working with so we have an idea. Sam, do you want to kick off?
All right. Okay, so at Bombs and Par, we work in a lot in culture. So we work with people like the Barbican. We're doing something with the V&A Museum of Childhood, getting kids to design an edible exhibition. And we're doing something on curses with the Petrie Museum. But then on the other side, which is Museum of Egyptology, I did try and do it with the British Museum, and they said we don't have anything that could be possibly relevant for curses, which I thought was like, utterly extraordinary. But then we work a lot in FMCG brands as well. So we work with the likes of Diageo, Pernod Ricard. We work a lot in retail, so we do stuff with all the big retailers. So Westfield, Debenhams, Selfridges, on and off, depending how we're getting on. Got a complex relationship. That's me.
Talk about that. Does this work? Yes.
Yeah.
I'll hold it here. Hello. So Reuben Fields, and we are immersive theatre specialists, and we work to commission from clients in marketing, entertainment, and the arts. To give you an idea of the range of clients, this year we've worked for EasyJet, Prudential Vietnam. We're currently working with Gingerline, clandestine dining experiences, and Everyman Cinema Group. Much the same kind of across all kind of sectors, a lot in the drinks industry. We also work for software companies, some FMCG, and then we do some kind of artistic collaborations and independent productions as well.
Okay. Mike?
Awesome. Morning, everyone. Mike from Jack Morton Worldwide. We're a global brand experience agency. Have some awesome clients working with the likes of Google, Facebook, Snap, Honda, Heineken, and a raft of others, all household names, and very proud of those relationships.
Okay. I'd just like to sort of open up with, Mike, you mentioned earlier that you'd been with the company for 20 years next week. Is that right? Yes. Okay.
I was 10.
All right. Oops, sorry.
Thanks.
So years ago, we used to call it meetings and events, and I think still we call it meetings and events. And I just want to know, is this term experiential marketing just really the emperor's new clothes for what is meetings and events?
No, definitely not. I think the world has changed, and I think we're enjoying that change, and I think experiences, the opportunity, people demand experiences, they want experiences, and the opportunity for brands to demonstrate a tangible, real, visceral experience of their brand, of the proof of their brand, and not just the promises that they're communicating, has never been more relevant. And I think we will be talking a lot over the coming years and weeks about reach and engagement and the value of engagement. I think experience, more so than anything, drives deeper engagement and creates memories, and memories which drive loyalty to brands. And I think I hope it's not the emperor's new clothes, because I've got a big mortgage, and I'm absolutely convinced it's not.
Okay. Isabel?
Yeah, I agree hugely. I think, and there we go. No, I do have more to say. I think as the environment becomes more digital, it's almost like to an extent, it's a backlash, but I think also when you think about digital, what happens is you get a very, very noisy environment. and people are constantly being bombarded with information. It's look over here, look over here, look over here. And I think experiential is a response that makes kind of sticky marketing. I think it's about creating a story that people relate to. I think it's about having an emotional engagement. It's telling a story that's authentic and relevant to the consumer. And then I think on the kind of consumer side, you've got, you know, if you take, for example, millennials, these people are not buying things, they're buying experiences. They want their brands to work hard for them. You can't stand on a pedestal and tell people they're bad unless they do as you say. You now have to have more of a meaningful conversation, and that, to me, is where experiential exists.
Okay. Sam, anything to add?
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. For me, it's just in this world where everyone spends all their time sort of glued to their phones. Who wants to look back at their life and says, you know what, I wish I spent more time looking at a screen. And also, when people are putting stuff up on their phones, they just need the raw material of creativity where they're a hero, and that comes from reality. With everyone a biographer telling the story of their amazing life. You, with venues, with brands, have to be the people giving them the content, just as we used to do with journalists, to tell their story of how awesome they are and how much hotter they are than their friends.
Are there any sectors that are specifically using experiential?
The stuff that I'm exposed to is, a lot of food and drink, which is inherently experiential. So quite naturally, you want people to try your product and and tell the story. One of the problems with food and drink is people are very, very bad at understanding and articulating taste and flavor, because we just don't operate in the world like that. You don't sit there and say, asking for directions, and someone gives it to you and they say, well, just wait till you smell the hot dog stand and then turn left. You say, what do you see the hot dog stand and turn left? So experiential is very, very good at giving people that language within which to understand food and drink.
Okay. Mike, anything to add to that? Brands that you see that are really picking up on experiential?
I think there's a lot of brands who've always been in experiential. High-ticket items, automotive is a cornerstone of our industry, and certainly the work that we've been doing. And I think there is, it's a conversation we were having earlier downstairs, the balance between the investment of experiential, which is quite large in terms of the reach that you can get. And I think FMCG works very well, but you have a challenge in terms of trying to stretch that, and at the core of it, having an exclusive experience as well. So it's also high-ticket items. Technology is picking up on it immensely. A lot of the global product launches are becoming far, far more experiential. And I think we're seeing a lot more companies come to us on their employer brand as well, and bringing to life the inside story and helping them to articulate that and to drive greater engagement internally. So I think that's an area which experiential is picking up again, where we kind of lost a bit to digital. To be honest, through 2008 and back then, certainly there was the economic challenges, but a lot of things went digital, and the engagement through internal digital channels is definitely not demonstrating the ROI. So they are coming back for much richer, experience-led thinking.
Okay, so Isabel, experiential marketing, we're getting an idea of the brands that are using it, and how it's engaging. But how does it fit in with the wider marketing mix, the advertising, the whole sort of piece? Where does experiential fit?
This sort of leads on really nicely in that, I constantly talk to our clients or potential clients about the return on investment so as an immersive storyteller within experiential, the cost per head is high. But what you're doing there, for the one, you educate about kind of the quality of engagement that you're getting with this audience. But then you talk about broadening that reach. And this is where experiential goes hand in hand with digital and things like that. If you're going to create a piece of brilliant content, then use these different platforms, get a Facebook live feed so that it hits 50,000 people, and then get a hero video that goes onto YouTube that is shared, bring in the influencers, bring in the journalists. And for us, we do a lot of product launches, and it'll be sort of 50 journalists who have no idea what they're turning up to. And we say, surprise, you're going to hunt elves through Shoreditch now because you're at a gaming launch for Witcher, for example. And it's the earned media that you get for things like that because people have had a memorable emotional experience that they want to write about. And I think really broadly, there is a kind of general shift from above the line to more targeted, and then so you have that, and then you extend the reach from there. But I think it's so important to understand that the wider the reach, the less engaged, the less targeted, the less personalized that experience is going to be. So you're looking to kind of use cross platforms to create that perfect balance, I'd say.
Sam, you mentioned earlier about being at a cross-agency meeting. So I'm assuming you're there with ad agencies, experiential. Obviously, you're seeing things with the marketing mix. Are people more willing to spend money?
Well, for me, it's having a good idea. If you've got a really good idea, everyone's really ready to spend money. If you've got a crap idea, they're not. So that's the power of coming up with a good idea,
Marvelous.
isn't it?
Okay.
The thing that we really love is you can have experiential lead that marketing mix. So that can be right at the very heart of a through the line campaign. And you know, Mike, we worked on a project together about which is actually this power of the good idea. I think one of the biggest all agencies I've been in is that project we worked on together when we did the New Year's Eve fireworks show for London, which Jack Morton does each year, I believe. Then Vodafone wanted someone to come up with something that had never been done before. Now, always ask to come up with stuff that's never been done before. You've got billions of people on the planet coming up with ideas that have never been done before, and also a lot of people who have existed before, who've done a lot of things in their lives. And I think they asked about 300 people to come up with something, and I came up with this idea of just being able to take the fireworks and being able to taste them. So you see red fireworks in the sky, and you smell strawberries going onto peach snow, edible banana confetti, Seville orange bubbles. And it was just such a simple idea, flavour fireworks, anyone can get it, you kind of get what's going on. It generally hadn't been done before. We worked with a lot of fireworks, actually an academic who specialises in the history of science, but what he really likes is fireworks. And he says that all of science throughout the ages is down to fireworks, all investment. But it's great, and so that idea was then able to drive all the digital campaign or the above the line campaign, and that's really good. But also experiential can work the other way around, so people can have a great idea and then use people like us to bring it to life in some sort of way.
Okay, Mike, just going back to being a bit boring here, but going back to budgets and no, me, just for the sake of the audience. Yeah, let's be dull. I just want to know, so obviously you're working on global campaigns. Who's the decision maker? Has it moved from an event manager to a finance director, or where does it sit now with experiential?
I think it is shared. Luckily or unfortunately, the numbers that we're talking about are significant, so they do get to CMO, C-suite level, often particularly on the global. Purchasing and procurement are involved to ensure that they can see the most value from whatever they're engaging with. And of course, at an event manager level, I think the decision of who to go with comes through the event manager and other members of that marketing team. But ultimately, the budget sign-off needs to go right up to the C-suite. Not in everything, of course, but certainly the large global campaigns, that's where it sits.
How does experiential differ from sponsorship? Surely it's the same thing.
Oh yeah, I'll go for that one.
Yay! Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
Well, sponsorship predominantly is about association and putting your brand next to a fan passion, something that people care about. But by simply doing that, you have no right to be in that environment and right to play. And I think experiential gives you the opportunity to distinguish why you're there as a sponsor and to enhance the fans' participation in what they love. And in doing that, experiential brings you closer to whatever it is that you love, and then you may share some of that love back to the brand who spent a lot of money. I think if it's simply a badging exercise, it is at best glorified hospitality and probably wouldn't get signed off by the C-suite and see the return on that investment. It needs to work, and it needs to work a lot harder.
Go on, Sam, jump in.
I was going to say, no one ever goes to an event because of the sponsor. The sponsor's just like, you deal with it. But actually, with an experiential, the person who was that sponsor can be creating the entire event, and you go to the event, you might even pay money to go and be marketed at for an hour because you're having such a rich experience. And I think that's kind of incredible.
Okay. Isabel, you mentioned earlier it's quite costly. So what measurements or what's the ROI on an experiential event?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to nip to there. I think you have some traditional vehicles. I mean, to be honest, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm really not a fan of it. You know, I'm the kind of person who says, look, you're going to change someone's life. Going back to the sponsorship very quickly, and then I'll go on to this one. It's the difference between feeling an inauthentic, like you're piggybacking on something that I love and you're kind of in the way of my enjoyment of this thing because your badge is here, versus you are the content creator. And the world that I am so immersed in and loving and engaged with is the world of the brand and the story. And that's just, you know, they're not even comparable. And so that quality of engagement is something vaguely immeasurable. It's about turning somebody into an ambassador, and you can trawl through kind of, you know, the social channels. And, you know, we did something for Courvoisier, and they needed to get engaged with millennials and say, look, this isn't, you know, warm balloon glasses for the over 50s. This is a cocktail for you guys. And, you know, you had millennials tweeting, you know, I've just fallen in love with Courvoisier. So, you know, I can pull those in and put them in a PCA document, but actually that's something that I can't really quantify. What you can do is put surveys on the end of an event and say, you know, how did you feel about this? Has it changed your life? Did you, you know, stuff like that. And then you look to, you know, I was talking before about engaging different digital channels. And then it's very clear, you know, if you look at the number of people who've, you know, seen this video, and then you can trace people's behavior online, but really the magic of experiential is something that's vaguely intangible in terms of those.
It's very romantic, isn't it, this whole...
I'm a hopeless romantic.
Well, no, there are just loads of metrics that people use in terms of like numbers of people through the event, people's survey results in terms of like how, you know, how much they share it, you know, social media reach, normal press reach. And I remember doing something with alcoholic architecture where we made a breathable cloud of gin and tonic that intoxicates your lungs and eyeballs, and my press agency is like, this is incredible. You've had like a reach of 4 billion. And you're sitting there going like, that's like such a sizable fraction of the global population. Surely there's some actually important things happening in the world today. But at the same time, I'm sat on a bus and the person in front of me is talking about it, and that, you know, and having like a normal conversation between humans about something that you're doing that is kind of a bit of marketing, and that for me is very, very heartfelt. I think like, you know, there are lots of metrics that you're asked to present as someone trying to do something that's quantifiable. I think they're questionable, but it's just one of those things where you know in your heart when something's really, really good, and you also know when something's really terrible.
Is that, Mike, can you justify that with C-Suite? When you spent £1 million across the world and it's like, it was lovely, it was great.
I wish. I don't have the charm of these two. It starts at the point of objectives. So understanding what the objectives are for the activity will always define what the measurable criteria are. And from that, you can build out the KPIs of whatever experience you're trying to build. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all. In fact, there's many sizes fit everything. Often we look at some of the things that if we can find a group who didn't have the experience versus those who did and the impact of that group, I think there's some exciting and interesting nascent sort of studies in emotion and emotion tracking, biometrics. You know, it's early days in terms of what we can do with that, but you know, we as an industry have always believed we have, you know, emotion has been the currency of experience, and I think now we're getting closer to be able just to, you know, at a simple level, track someone's heartbeat level. You know, some of you may have a 0 heartbeat at the moment in this presentation. Some of you may be interested. You know, we can track that from Fitbit and other things, and that's early days. So I think technology will help us being able to quantify. The other thing is, you know, it is, and we're all experiencing a growing industry where there's more and more focus on it. So whilst we want to rationalize it, if it wasn't working, people wouldn't be spending more money and putting more focus on it. So I think we all have to accept it does work.
Okay.
And I'm very skeptical of some of the tech emotional tracking at the moment, which I think in years to come can be very useful. But I think at the moment, like, so doing loads of stuff with like EEG and reading your EEG as you go across. So just basically what your brain's doing as you go across an event, and it looks incredible. You're getting all these graphs of beta and theta readouts, and you're saying, "Wow, this is incredible." They're having a really profound experience. Now I know from using a lot of EEG that if you scratch your face, like the metrics go off the chart. So you could have someone that looks like they're really, really engaged, having this incredible like time, but they've just got a rash. So it's a proxy. It's nice to be able to have these measurements, but I think there is still a space for being a critic yourself and trusting your gut.
Okay. Isabel, you mentioned earlier about millennials wanting an experience. So are experiential, immersive events open to, or sort of, is there an age group that's more susceptible to these events?
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of behavior that we have as a kind of, okay, who are these people? Let's look at them. The millennials, it would seem, are kind of front runners in it being the people to enjoy this experience. But if you break down what experiential is, especially as kind of immersive storytellers, as kind of specialist suppliers within the kind of experiential, it's highly engaged storytelling. And when you think about storytelling, it's ancient. We've done it for as long as we can speak. And before that, we drew cave paintings. And the things that kind of come out in our brain when we're storytelling, the oxytocin, the dopamine, the endorphins, that helps us retain memory, that helps us empathize and engage with one another. It puts us in this very present, very playful state. And that's the kind of engagement bit as when we get people playing, they're totally present and their brains are firing. We don't like ECG scanners, but it's a kind of neurological phenomena. So those two things, they're absolutely universal. It doesn't matter if you're a 5-year-old child or a 90-year-old man. These are very fundamental human things, and I don't think you can underestimate the power of putting a human being in that human state and then giving them a very authentic experience. It's the most powerful thing we can do, and there's not a denomination that isn't relevant to.
Okay. Would you agree with that, Mike, if you've got a more corporate brand versus perhaps a fireworks display?
Yes. I mean, it's human nature. We all seek out experiences, be they for our own pleasure, from restaurants to holidays to everything else, and incorporating a brand and a narrative into that and trying to structure that experience is universal. There is no one single group, unless you're ready to die, that don't want to go and have experiences and remember those. I don't think it is particular to any group. It may be more prevalent with a millennial mindset rather than demographic, and that's another thing. But I think it's across the board. And I think in today's world, unless you're standing out and creating experiences for the audiences you want to engage, you will be forgotten. So it is all the way through.
How's tech fitting in with bringing people together face to face? This whole experience. Where does tech fit in? Because we're probably being pushed online. So how do you marry the two?
Can I give you an example? I'm quite an analog creature. But we, a couple of years ago, launched the sophomore album of a band called Hertz. So we worked with Sony in an agency within them called Foam. So it was a wonderful job. We were looking at the kind of narrative within the album. So the band came to us and they were like, it's kind of about exile and about the Russian bloc, Eastern Bloc. It's quite, it's kind of culty. So we were like, okay, amazing. So we had two kind of objectives to hit. One was to reach journalists and get them talking about it. And the other one was to just kind of give something to the fans, get them listening to this album. So the thing we did for the journalists was very analog. It was literally a paper trail. So we sent them a letter in the post saying it was really fantastic to meet you last night. Thanks for lending me your jacket. Here's the laundry tag. And then they went to the laundry next door to their house, and inside the tuxedo jacket pocket was a golden tape and a tape recorder, and that played the songs from the album, and then there was an invitation. And essentially, at the launch of the album, they were indoctrinated into a cult. So lovely. And then the second part of that was for the fans. So you want to engage maybe 50, 75 journalists, but you want some reach. You want them to be writing about this. For the fans, what we did was create a binaural choose-your-own-adventure story. So it's still immersive storytelling, and you're using technology as a platform because you don't want to do this to the beautiful 50 people in this room. You want to do this to 250,000 fans. So you create a story along the same narrative, and it's, I don't know if you know binaural, it's extraordinary. It's you put it in your headphones, it's terribly simple. You do it blindfolded, and then you hear sound like geographically, and it feels like somebody's creeping up behind you and whispering in your ear. It's glorious and very, very simple. So we created a choose-your-own-adventure story, and with the 12 different endings, you had the 12 samples of the 12 different songs, and that was a way of kind of rewarding the fans, giving them a kind of sense of the broader narrative of this album, and getting them to sample the music. And that, to me, was a really great example of how you can keep something intimate and rewarding and narrative-led and immersive, but really send it out. So to me, technology is a phenomenal platform, but what you have to remember, and I think it's something that we sort of backtracked from, we got really excited about all these new digital things and went absolutely mental for them, and then realized that it's the content that people care about. Otherwise, it's just a gimmick. So making sure that you've got valuable content and putting it in very exciting new forms in people's hands.
Okay. Anything to add?
Yeah, tech's a tool in your toolbox, and it's good to keep up with it. There's been actually quite an interesting moment right now in terms of experiential and tech. Now, of course, tech, to some extent, has always been part of experiential. No matter what form, there's been speaker systems, there have been lights. You need sparks to go and operate it. But right now, a lot of technology stuff is coming way down in price, where it was, you do something and someone would say, like, let's do some projection mapping and build an app. And you're like, oh, great, you got $500,000. And now a lot of that stuff is becoming way, way cheaper. And you can have it be integrated into your experiential event as just another, efficient way to change sets rather than being the big event itself. I remember just a few years ago, just projection mapping on a building was an event. Now if you just did it, it'd just be give two hoots. Quite rightly, it's not very interesting. So it's a useful tool to have, and it's I think we're just starting to see the first forays as well in an interesting integration of VR and real-world experiences, which before there have been people who've done one really well. There haven't been very many people who've been able to cross over, and that's a really exciting area at the moment.
Okay. Is tech something you use widely at Jack Morton?
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is a reflection of how people live their lives, and experiences have to reflect that, and we embrace all of the opportunities. I think there was definitely a tech race, which I'm happy to see is sort of not tech for tech's sake, and humanity is being married to that innovation. But I think, it has never been a more exciting time with the toolbox or the toolkit that we've got. AR, I think, is going to be transformative more so than VR because of the form factor of this thing, which is just a bit clunky. But, everyone is on their phone, so it's a simple step to see a personal experience through your phone in an AR way, which probably next year there will already be most of this room personalized to the individual once, iPhone comes out, and Google are doing the same with their AR app. So it really is not a necessary, it is a representation and reflection of the way people live their lives. To try and delineate between the two, I think, is peculiar.
Okay.
And strange, because people don't live in one or the other.
Okay.
We just live.
Isabel, you painted a beautiful picture of how you launched the band and what was done. Can you just give us an example of a B2B event that you've worked on, or a B2B brand, and how you brought that to life?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Good.
Great. Okay, here we all are. Something we did for the sort of software megalith Symantec. So they're the kind of fathers of Norton antivirus software. So every year they've kind of positioned themselves. They're, you know, the market leaders. They don't need a bigger market share. So what they can do is kind of strengthen their position as the experts in the field. So they put on a conference somewhere in the world every year. This one was in Barcelona. And along this, so the invited people are, you know, everyone in the information security industry. And they, in a bid to kind of like, okay, we need to be the best information security people. And the way to really approach this is to look at putting ourselves in the mind of our adversaries. Essentially, they developed a piece of software which was designed to put the information security experts as the hackers. So at the center of this conference was this gameplay that was going to happen. And they brought us in to kind of make it real world. So we put this scenario in that was around corporate espionage and cybersecurity, which is very exciting. So it's 2,500 delegates. There are going to be 200 people playing this game. But how are we going to wrap the world of, you know, conferences? Who cares? But we need to get people really excited about this. So essentially we're seeding the narrative of this kind of false company called Trendsetter Corp, who were, you know, mergers and acquisitions left, right and center, looking a bit fishy. And then you've got a kind of investigative journalist sniffing around as well. Trendsetter Corp, the way that people were approached to sign up for the cybersecurity gameplay was that sort of a mob of black-suited people, sort of men in black style, would say, "Could you come with me, sir?" And they were sort of brought into the club as if they were being approached by MI6. And, you know, a top-secret briefcase was opened, and they had a personal message from the CEO, Alex Lockwood. And that was the way that we drove sign-up. So you know that sort of, can I interest you at all in, what are you doing? Do you have an hour? No. We are going to make this about you. You're going to be the hero. We're going to surprise and delight you. We're going to put a breadcrumb trail of kind of strange clues that you have to trace all the way through this experience and conference. So that's how we registered everyone. And then there was a recruitment little video that went in at the keynote speech. So all 2,500 people in the room. Again, the CEO, Alex Lockwood, of this dodgy company is saying, "We need you." And then that is intercepted by a kind of good hacker who's like, "No, this is bad. Follow me, people. I've got the trail." So there we have the sort of, and what I talk about often is the kind of very engaged pieces of storytelling where 400 people have been really kind of brought into the narrative with our actors. But then you have these big sweeps of storytelling where you have the kind of video in the keynote speech, and then there were digital boards everywhere where kind of there were news channels, and we'd created all the content, so interviews with journalists and the CEO. And that was the main space where people were getting their information for the conference. So you're wrapping the whole world in our narrative. And then they did this gameplay, and essentially, you know, the world was saved by our team. I'm not sure that was that comprehensive?
It was perfect. Because
there you go.
so that's a great example of a tech client. Mike, have you got anything that's tech that you can sort of bring to life for us?
In terms of the B2B?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, sort of riffing off that point, I think one of the challenges of experiential or immersive is scale. It's something we were talking about downstairs. And I think, you know, this isn't experiential. You guys are sitting there listening to us. There is no interaction. There is not much, you know, you're not even sort of, it's not personalized to you, and you're certainly not participants. And that's one of the challenges, I guess, you know, in terms of the B2B and the scale of how do we find those moments. Technology is one of those things that you can do to overcome it. We had 5,000 people simultaneously having a VR experience in the middle of a Samsung launch, which technologically was a nightmare, but we pulled it off. And it was really interesting as well because a lot of people were talking about that technology being isolationary, or it takes you out of group situations. In fact, it was the opposite, because all that does is change what you're seeing. And if you're seeing the same thing at the same time, it just changes that visual sense. So we had 5,000 people who had a totally sort of extraordinary visual experience in the middle of this launch, and they all took their things off and they were talking to each other about what they saw and what they did. And so that in itself was one of the more experience, and it's kind of counterintuitive that when you put someone in an isolation chamber, but actually they're all seeing and experiencing the same thing, that you can create something of immersion. I think it's one of the great tensions that we have, is this sort of how do you create personalized experiences but also shared experiences? And I think that's something we will continue to explore and struggle with and succeed with, as well as technology and experiential becomes ever more powerful.
Sam, would you say B2C is easier to work with than B2B?
Not really. I wouldn't. It's almost like I wouldn't differentiate between the two. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're addressing a human, whether you're a consumer or they're in a business context. You still have the same drivers, and humans across time have always been excited by the same things. So things like flames coming up, nudity, animals running through the audience. Like, these are all things that it doesn't matter if you're there in a business context or as a consumer, suddenly everyone comes to life and you're just like, oh, this is great, something's happening, it's like normal, I can get involved. So somehow, well, some of our events, but like that, it was quite interesting. We did one thing I really wanted to do, and I hate Valentine's Day so much. It's just dire. It doesn't matter whether you're in a relationship or you're not in a relationship. It's just mortifying. And so I was trying to do an event on Valentine's Day just so I've got an excuse to actually work. And we did one because we do loads and loads of whiskey tastings, and I was amazed by people sit there and they have the really expensive whiskey, they smash it, they ask for more expensive whiskey, smash that, have some whiskey that's improbably aged, it's been in barrels for 40 years, they've probably never tasted anything as old, they probably never will again, and they just smash that. And by that time, they've already had 2 whiskeys, which for most people is quite a lot in quick succession. So it's questionable what they get out of it, what they can remember. So I thought it would be really interesting to get people to really involved with what's in the glass and the aging process. So we found a whole host of people who on Valentine's Day were willing to use their bodies as drinking vessels. And there are quite a lot of people who are up for volunteering for this. We had people from 25 to 52, and they came along, they told the story of their life, and we'd found for each of them the whiskey that had been put into cask in the same year that they were born. So they told the story of their life. And if you're 25 and up, everyone's had something awesome happen to them, or something that you can reflect on that's quite interesting for other humans. And then after that, they stripped, and they indicated where you could lick the whiskey off with these fabulous whiskeys. And we did have one 62-year-old volunteer, well, no, it's quite interesting. We found some whiskey that was 62 years old, but sadly it cost £120,000, and we were self-financing this. It was a passion project. So we couldn't quite afford that, but we invited him along. We did try the same thing with an investment bank, and awkwardly everyone stood around but didn't want to do anything. But they were very happy to drink the whiskey. So sometimes there's a reluctance in B2B.
Can I, just on that,
Yeah.
what about sweat or body lotion or anything?
Well, we had sanitized everyone beforehand. And so it was almost like, if you're a chef and you're cooking with your hands, you're going to touch the food. We treated it like in that scenario. Okay. But I'm sure it added a certain something to it. Well, it did warm it up as well, so it releases a lot of different flavors that you wouldn't normally have.
Mike, you shook your head when I asked the question. So there was a different, not about, when I asked if there was a question between B2B and the consumer side, you don't see any difference? They're humans at the end of the day.
I think you wear a different costume or uniform, so you kind of work to a different beat, but fundamentally the success comes at a human level, and that cuts through, whether it's a B2B or B2C. There's a slightly different rhythm that you need to play, and sometimes it's more rational or emotional, but I think we are entering a world where we will be segmenting less on what someone is up to, whether it's a B2B or B2C. It's human to human or brand to human that we need to engage with, and I think that will be the way of the world, because it's a little bit silly to suggest that because you're in a B2B environment, different things work. You need to dial different things up and down, but it's...
I think that's quite interesting also in clients as well. So quite often the things that we get signed off is not because this client is representing the brand which they're a physical embodiment of on Earth, like is sent down from like Planet Brand. It's actually because they're a human and they think it's quite a cool idea, and they've got a load of discretionary money, or sometimes they've just got a bit of stuff left in the budget that they need to spend by the end of the year, and what you're proposing to them sounds pretty cool.
Okay.
Which is not a bad thing.
Just within the audience that is here, how many brands have we got? Okay. How many agencies? And how many venues? Okay, so what's everyone else? There's a lot of... I think we're in the wrong room. No. I just wanted to ask a question, because we deal with a lot of venues, and one thing that they always complain about is they will put on a showcase event and no one pitches up. So if you were going to do a showcase for a venue, making it experiential, what would you do?
Yeah, like, why would you go to a showcase of a venue? Like,
because they need to, this is how they have to do it, is to do call it a fam trip, whatever it is, they will try and showcase themselves.
For me, what I'd be looking to do as a venue is host something that is culturally relevant in the city. So it's you're getting big spreads in time out. So you're maybe putting on a full experiential production, which people are paying to come along to go to, as they would any other. And then you also invite your crucial clients as well along to that as well.
Okay. Isabel?
Yeah, I really agree. I think what you need to do is have something that people want to come to, and you need that product. And I would say, adding to what Sam said, it's kind of create something with a buzz around it, something that people want to come to, and don't be afraid to ticket it, because people will pay. But then bear in mind what your objectives are as the venue, and what you want your audience to think, feel, and do. So, and I don't think that you'll not compromise the integrity of the story or the experience if you're making sure that one of your tick points is to put the history of the venue inside this, so that the brand comes alive for them. Treat yourself as a brand. Or then you say, look, I need them to move through the whole space. So there's a great central space, but actually all of the offshoots are really interesting. So create something where your audience move through it. Just create something that has a talking point that people will want to see, but then make sure that is serving you as a venue and ticking your objectives as well. It's very interesting.
So just can I go again? So just by way of example, next month we're launching Bombs and Pars catering arm, and rather than just doing a catering showcase, which people who might commission caterers can come along to, I'm like, sod that, because I've got to pay loads for that as well. I'm just going to do a public event which people pay for tickets of which I'll also invite the sorts of people that I want to commission us to do catering. I get them in for free because all the cost is offset by the cost of the public buying tickets, and at the same time I'm getting that in Time Out, Evening Standard, all of that as a public event for London, and I'm also doing something that I quite want to do as well, which is holding an enormous feast of flowers and poison bars and edible champagne bubbles and things like that.
Okay, Mike, just rounding up before we open up to the floor, who do you think does experiential really well? Not your clients. No, just anyone in the world that you think does an amazing job.
The guys sitting next to me do an awesome job. I do often, sometimes more often than I'd like, look at their work enviously. But I think there's lots of people. But us, really. I mean,
yes.
I mean,
Isabel, Butt is a big brand in there. Do you work with Butt? No. Who do you think does things really well?
I don't know. I don't want to answer that question, Sam.
Well,
I've tried for you.
I think we were talking about this earlier as well, and how it's actually it's a small pool of people who intermingle and work together. And we've worked together. We've competed on jobs. Actually worked out. We were pitching for the Curzon as well, which you got. Every man. No, that's it. Every man. We're pitching on that. Oh, well, that's probably why I didn't get it. Helps you remember.
Long hard look in the mirror.
But I mean, there are tons of people. Some we work with, and they add. I love working with you guys at Jack Morton because you just bring something else to it in terms of like really big production that we don't have, and we get to learn how you do it. Hopefully, you get to learn something from our modus operandi as well. Other people I like doing a lot of work with Les Enfants Terribles at the moment, who came from a theatrical background. The guys from Punch Drunk are obviously really good on like a digital side. Marshmallow Laser Feast are doing some really interesting work, which is now they're doing more sort of real life stuff. But it's kind of obviously secret cinema, just like totally smash it. But you'll tend to find that it's all the same people that worked on all these things. They'll be speaking to the same clients. They'll be speaking to the same agencies. And also you have like personnel swapping between them. I think there was a time when there wasn't a single person that applied for a job with us that hadn't worked at Yumi Bum Bum Train, Secret Cinema, Punch Drunk, like literally all of them. So it's actually a good thing because knowledge is being shared across the industry, and I think people have a lot to learn from whatever discipline they're coming to it to start.